Have you ever felt like you're spinning your wheels, Like you're trying to make big changes, but just not getting anywhere?
I think we've all been there.
It can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
But I recently stumbled on this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it was like a light bulb went off.
Oh, yeah, I know that book. It's all about those tiny changes, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's about making those small, incremental improvements that most people don't even think about. But guess what? Those tiny changes, they compound over time.
It's like that whole snowball effect, right? It starts small, but as it rolls, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Exactly. So we're taking a deep dive into Atomic Habits today. We'll uncover the science behind habit formation. We'll talk about systems versus goals. And we'll give you some actionable strategies that you can start using today.
I think a lot of people think they need to make these huge, sweeping changes to see results. But that can be so overwhelming. It's no wonder so many people give up before they even really start.
Yeah, so Clear really emphasizes the power of those tiny gains, those 1% improvements that you make each day. Like, can you even imagine being 1% better at something every single day?
That would add up so quickly, right? But people don't realize the flip side is true too. If you're 1% worse every day.
Oof, that's not a good thought. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So where do we even begin?
Well, Clear argues that it's not just about setting goals, it's about building systems.
Oh, so it's not enough to say, I want to lose weight or I want to write a book.
Nope. It's like you said earlier, those are just wishes. To make them happen, you need a system. A system is basically a set of repeatable steps or actions that you take consistently.
Okay, so say my goal is to run a marathon. What would my system look like?
Well, it would involve things like setting a specific training schedule, figuring out how many miles you need to run each week, planning your meals to make sure you're fueling your body properly.
And all of those little steps within the system, those are the atomic habits, right?
Exactly. So instead of focusing on the outcome, you're focusing on the process, on the daily actions that will ultimately get you there.
But how do we actually make those habits stick? Because let's be honest, we all start with good intentions, but then life gets in the way and poof, the motivation disappears.
Well, one of the most fascinating things that Clear talks about is this idea of identity-based habits. It's about changing your beliefs about yourself, which then leads to changes in your behavior.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that mean?
So let's say you want to become a writer. Instead of just saying, I want to write a book, you start thinking of yourself as a writer.
So it's like you're embodying that identity even before you've achieved the goal.
Right. And then you start acting in ways that are consistent with that identity. You make time for writing every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. You start paying attention to the world around you as a writer would.
It's like you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And that shift in identity makes it easier to stick with those habits because they're no longer things you're forcing yourself to do. They're simply part of who you are.
So it's like those habits become almost effortless because they're aligned with your self-image. That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And it's a lot more effective than relying on willpower alone, which, let's face it, is a limited resource.
So we're not just talking about forming any old habit, right? We're talking about forming good habits. And Clear has this really helpful framework, the 4 laws of behavior change.
Oh, yeah. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying.
And then to break a bad habit, you just invert those laws.
Exactly. You make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
So simple, but so brilliant. So how can we use those laws to build good habits? Say, I wanted to start meditating every morning. Where do I even begin?
Well, let's start with the first law. Make it obvious. You could try setting up a visual cue, like placing your meditation cushion in the middle of your living room floor so you can't miss it.
Oh, I see. You're making it impossible to ignore. So I'm basically designing my environment to support the habit I want to build.
Right. And then to make it attractive, you could try pairing your meditation with something you already enjoy. Remember the temptation bundling we talked about before?
Yeah, I'm still a little iffy about that one. It seems like I would just end up skipping the habit and going straight for the reward.
I mean, it definitely takes some self-control, right? But let's say you love listening to a particular podcast. You could make a rule that you only listen to it while you're meditating.
Okay, so I'm connecting the habit I want to build with something I already love doing. I can see how that could work. And then there's make it easy. I think this is where I struggle the most. I have a tendency to overcomplicate things.
I think we all do that sometimes. But the key is to reduce the friction, So if you want to work out in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Or what about this? Instead of committing to a full hour-long workout, start with just 5 minutes.
Exactly. Make the initial step so small that you can't say no. You can always increase the duration later once the habit is established.
Wow, that's a game changer. Okay, and the last one, make it satisfying. How do we ensure a habit is rewarding so we keep coming back for more?
One really effective strategy is tracking your progress. Like, you could use a habit tracker app, you could mark it off on a calendar, or you could even just give yourself a mental high five every time you complete the habit.
Oh, I love the calendar idea. It's so visual,
Hmm.
and it feels so good to see a chain of successful days.
Right. And speaking of chaining things together, we briefly touched on this idea of habit stacking earlier.
I wanted to hear more about that.
So habit stacking is basically when you piggyback a new habit onto an existing habit. This works because your brain already has established neural pathways for the existing habit, so it makes it much easier to add a new habit on top.
So give me an example.
Okay, let's say you want to start flossing regularly. You could stack flossing onto your existing habit of brushing your teeth.
Oh, so it's like when I finish brushing my teeth, that becomes the cue to floss.
Exactly. And you're more likely to do it because it's tied to an existing routine.
Makes sense. And to tie everything together, how about this? Let's say I want to drink more water throughout the day. What would be a good habit stack for that?
Well, think about an existing habit that you already do regularly. Let's say every morning you make a cup of coffee.
Oh, so I could put a full glass of water next to my coffee cup and make it a rule to drink the water before I have my coffee.
Here you go. You're using an existing habit, making coffee, as the cue to trigger the new habit. It's like setting up a chain reaction in your brain.
This is blowing my mind. There are so many cool strategies here, and I feel like I'm already starting to see my habits in a whole new light.
It's not about willpower, it's not about motivation, it's about understanding the science of how habits work, and then using that knowledge to design your environment and your actions to support the changes you want to make.
So if you could give our listeners one piece of advice, one small change they could make today, what would it be?
Honestly, it's to choose one tiny habit, just one, and start doing it consistently. Make it so small that it seems almost ridiculous, and then just keep doing it day after day. I promise you, those small, consistent actions will add up to remarkable results over time.
It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Exactly. So, dear listener, what one tiny change are you going to make today? Remember, it's not about giant leaps. It's about the consistent practice of tiny atomic habits. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.